Pregnant beggar. Asked the millionaire for leftovers but one. Look at her changed everything. Marina clutched her 7 months pregnant belly and stepped up to a sharp-looking businessman's table. "Excuse me, sir," she said, her voice shaking from cold and hunger. "Is there anything you're not going to eat?" Alexander Sanders stopped cutting into his $600 prime ribeye and looked up. Standing before him was a young, pregnant woman, her clothes soaked and torn, her eyes brimmed with tears and raw desperation. "How long has it been since you ate?" Alexander asked, feeling something unfamiliar stir in his chest. 3 days, sir. I swear I'm not an addict or anything. It's just I lost my job when they found out I was pregnant," Marina answered, touching her swollen stomach. The entire Manhattan steakhouse fell silent. Wealthy diners set down their forks and stared. Some whispered with curled lips. "How disgusting," a woman dripping in jewelry said. "How do they let people like that in here? Look at her. Just another con artist," muttered a man in a suit. "I bet she isn't even really pregnant." Anger rose in Alexander against the room. He looked back at Marina and saw the tremor in her shoulders cold. Yes, but also shame. "Sit here beside me," Alexander said, pulling out a chair. "Waiter, please bring another plate for my guest." The waiter paled. "Mr. Sanders, she can't stay here," he hissed. "She'll scare off the other clients." "I said bring another plate," Alexander repeated louder. "And add a very sweet orange juice." Marina's lip quivered. "Are you sure?" "I'm very dirty and wet." You're fine. You need help," Alexander replied. "What's your name?" "Marina Davis." "Marina. I'm Alexander," he said, voice gentler. "And tonight, you're going to eat whatever you want." The plate arrived with a scowl. Marinara steam lifted like a prayer. Marina ate slowly at first, cautious, as if the moment might be snatched back. Then faster, tiny, grateful bites that tasted like life returning. Alexander watched in silence, his heart tightening at the way she tried to be neat about hunger. "Where do you live?" he asked. "Wherever there's room," she said. "Under the overpass, if it doesn't rain." "And the baby's father?" Her fork paused. "He left. Said he wasn't built to be a dad." "Family?" "My mom died when I was 16, she said softly. "It's been me and her." She patted her tummy, and something like light crossed her face. "She keeps kicking, like she's telling me to keep going." Alexander nodded, throat tight. Across the room, a girl of 12, bored at her parents' table, had her phone up. Marina didn't see the lens, but Alexander did. A tiny red dot recording a world that had always watched people like Marina, but rarely listened. "Marina," he said, "I have a house that's too big and too quiet. Come home with me tonight. Safe guest room, lock on the door, hot shower. No expectations, no debt." Her eyes searched his face for the trap. "Why would you?" "Because someone should have long before tonight." The waiter returned, voice clipped. "Sir," the manager insists. Alexander's gaze cut to him. "Bring the check. And please stop hovering like compassion is contagious." Increased. A ripple moved through the room, some shame, some curiosity, some filming. The bored girl's camera caught the moment he stood, took off his jacket, and settled it around Marina's shoulders. It hung like borrowed armor. They walked out together into rain that smelled like new beginnings. A man in a navy suit muttered something. Alexander didn't turn. Marina kept a hand at her belly and her eyes down until he opened the car door and said quietly, "You can change your mind at any point. I'll take you anywhere you feel safe." She nodded, slid into leather softer than anything she'd touched in months, and exhaled a sound that was not quite a sob. As the car pulled away, Marina whispered, "From this day forward," you said, "I'm not homeless." "You're a mother-to-be," he said, steady on the wheel. "You deserve respect." For the first time in months, hope didn't hurt. His house on the Upper East Side was glass and quiet and a little sad, the kind of sad that comes from echoing rooms and calendar alerts. Inside, he showed her the guest room. Cream linens, a nightstand, a private bath. "There's food in the fridge," he said. "Fresh towels. Lock the door if it helps you rest." She nodded, overwhelmed. "I don't know how to thank you. The baby's already moving more since I ate. I think she's happy." "Good. he said, and the words seemed to loosen something in him. Tomorrow we'll see a doctor and get you what you need, if you want. She hesitated. I want. He left chamomile tea at her door with a note. Sleep. You're safe. In the shower, she cried without having to apologize. In the mirror, she barely recognized the clean girl blinking back at her. She whispered to the baby, Our life is going to change. This man is kind. Around 3 a.m, pain tore through her belly like a rip in the sky. Alexander, she cried, voice breaking. He was already running, barefoot, hair mussed, eyes sharp with fear. What is it? My stomach, it hurts so bad. Something's wrong. He wrapped her in the yellow throw from the end of the bed. We're going now, he said, voice a calm anchor. Breathe with me. She clung to his arm. If something happens, promise you'll take care of her. Nothing is happening to you, he said, jaw set. I won't let it. Red lights became suggestions. The city parted. He didn't pray often. Tonight he did every time she fell silent between contractions. At the hospital doors. Help. She's in severe pain. She's pregnant. Nurses moved fast. A wheelchair appeared. Marina's fingers slipped from his for a heartbeat, and his heart lurched. He paced an eternity that was only an hour. When the doctor finally emerged, face grave, Alexander felt the floor tilt. She's stable, the doctor said. But she's not 7 months, she's closer to 9. Malnourished and anemic, yes, but the baby girl is strong. She's ready. A small sound left Alexander's throat when the ultrasound's fluttering heartbeat lit the screen. Not sorrow, not confusion, something protective and fierce. He thanked the doctor, then went to Marina. She was curled on her side, tears shining, breath ragged. Is the baby okay? She whispered. Tell me the truth. He has about Wayne. She's perfect, he said, and tried to smile. It's you we're worried about. You're further along. You've carried too much alone. I tried, she said, ashamed. Life hasn't been kind. You've been brave, he said. You're in labor. You'll hold her soon. I can't repay. You don't owe me, he said, voice rough. If you'll let me, I'd like to be her godfather. She nodded, tears spilling. I'd love that. A nurse poked her head in. Sir, your wife is due. Do you want to come in? Wife. Not true. Not yet. Maybe never. His answer was immediate. Yes, Alexander said, stepping to Marina's side and threading his fingers through hers. I'm coming with her. They disappeared through swinging doors, 2 people not bound by blood or vows, tied instead by something smaller and stronger, a promise made over a shared plate and kept in the dark. Hours later, in recovery, he cradled a tiny girl whose fingers wrapped around the edge of his thumb like a latching star. Hi, Hope, he whispered. Your godfather's here. Back at the house a week later, a nursery-weighted white crib, moon nightlight, a yellow blanket like folded sunlight. Marina stood in the doorway and cried. You spent a fortune. Money isn't the issue, he said. I want Hope to have the best. And you're too good to us, she said, tucking a curl behind her ear. Why didn't you ever marry, Alexander? He looked at the little moon on the wall. Hard to find someone who loves me and not everything else. She nodded. I get that. She told him about Carlos, the fiancé she'd lost to a motorcycle accident, and the bad choices grief made after. You deserve someone who sees you, he said. So do you, she answered. And because life rarely pauses for people who finally feel safe, something else had already begun far from the warmth of their small new world. A video posted by a 12-year-old of a billionaire giving his jacket to a pregnant woman and telling a maitre d' to bring a second plate. It had a title no PR firm could have engineered. By morning, it would have millions of views, and an anonymous account would post a short, shaky clip from the restaurant's bar. Someone slipping a diamond bracelet into Marina's coat pocket as she sat down. By noon, kindness would be trending. By 2, thief would be. And by the end of the day, Alexander would have to choose whether to protect a reputation or a person. He already knew the answer. The text found Alexander before the sun did. You're trending. A link followed. Then another. then a dozen more. He tapped one. The video opened on the steakhouse's amber light. A girl's voice whispered, awed and shaky, "Look." The frame caught Marina, drenched and trembling. Then Alexander's jacket around her shoulders. Then the moment the room rearranged itself around a second plate. The caption read, "Make room." It had been posted at 10:43 p.m. By 6:12 a.m., it had 4 million views. Alexander put the phone down and walked to the guest room doorway. Morning was still shy at the windows. The city's roar sounded far away, softened by old trees and newer glass. Inside, Marina slept on her side, one hand on the gentle rise of her belly, the other curled beneath her cheek, the yellow throat tucked around her like a small sun. He didn't wake her. He stood there and exhaled, feeling a strange mixture of pride and dread, like watching a candle you lit begin to set the whole room alight, beautiful, and also dangerous if no one moved carefully. He brewed tea. He set out fruit. He ate exactly nothing. At 7, as if some internal clock found him through walls, Hope announced herself with a rolling, insistent nudge that made Marina stir, then smile before her eyes even opened. "Good morning," Alexander said from the doorway when she blinked awake. "Morning," she whispered, and her voice already sounded less brittle than it had yesterday. "She's practicing somersaults." "Very advanced," he said gravely. "Tea?" She nodded, pushing herself up on an elbow. "Please." He brought the tray in. Her smile warmed when she saw the steam. She sipped, then noticed his expression had that quiet, thinking edge. "What is it?" she asked, instantly alert. "Is something wrong?" "No," he said truthfully, then added the more complicated truth. "You're on the internet." She went still. The mug paused halfway to her lips. "What?" "A diner filmed last night," he said. "It's everywhere." Color drained from her face, then returned in a rush. She tightened the throw around her shoulders. "Everywhere as in, people will recognize me?" "Maybe," he admitted. "But the response is kindness. People are moved. They're angry about how you were treated. We can manage this." Her eyes flicked to her belly. "I don't want her life on screens before she even has a name." "We'll keep her private," he said. "Your boundaries come first." "Wait," Marina swallowed. "Will they call me things?" "They'll try," he said. "And I won't let it stick." He meant the words, and she heard that he did. Still, the air had changed. She held the mug with both hands like a small shield. "Eat first," he said. "Then we decide our next hour. Not the internet." They ate. He answered 2 emails that could not wait. She showered and braided her hair with quick, practical fingers. When she reemerged in a soft blouse and the maternity jeans he'd had delivered after the doctor's visit, he was ready with a plan he hoped felt like permission, not control. "2 thoughts," he said. 1. We keep the door shut today. No one comes in. We rest, call the doctor with your lab results, and ignore the noise. 2. We go on our terms to the restaurant, ask for the security footage, and make sure what people saw last night isn't twisted by the people who felt ashamed of it. She watched his face. "Which do you want?" "I want the one that makes you feel safer," he said. She breathed out. "Then we go." "I'd like to know what they'll say when it isn't raining." He smiled, small and real. "Then we go." They stepped through the steakhouse doors at 9:15 a.m., when the place smelled like bleach and coffee, not truffle butter. The chandeliers were dim. Chairs were still upended on tables. The general manager, slick hair, brittle smile, appeared fast, the kind of fast that tries to look like welcome. "Mr. Sanders," he said, as if he greeted the owner every morning. "This is unexpected." "Morning, Greg," Alexander replied. He hadn't bothered with the pretense when he signed the checks either, but some men needed theater to feel tall. "We're here for the security footage from last night." Greg's smile pinched. "I'm afraid we can't share guest footage." "You can with the owner," Alexander said. "Not unkind, just not in the mood to braid the truth with velvet." Greg faltered, then rallied. "There's another matter," he said, leaning in, lowering his voice, as if the empty room might gossip. "After you left, one of our patrons reported a missing bracelet." "Diamond. Very sentimental. Our staff found it this morning. He lifted a sealed evidence bag from behind the host stand, like a magician producing a rabbit, in your guest's coat. Marina went cold. Her lungs forgot their choreography. Alexander's hand didn't touch her, but she felt the steadying force of him as if it had. "Whose bracelet?" Alexander asked. "A Mrs. Carroway." Greg's eyes flicked to Marina in a manner that would have been merely rude if it hadn't been so careful. "We'll need to resolve this quietly." "No," Alexander said, calm as weather. "We'll resolve it truthfully." He took out his phone and, with a few taps, called the head of security for the restaurant group. "I need all camera angles from last night between 8 and 10, he said. "Lobby, dining room, bar, send them now." Greg's smile curdled. "Mr. Sanders, our policy, Alexander said, is to protect guests from theft, not to plant it. Who had access to my guest's coat?" Greg blinked. There was a moment when a server offered to hang it, but your guest declined." "So how did a bracelet find its way inside it?" Alexander asked. A hush gathered, the kind that makes kitchens go still. The hostess set down her wipe and attempted to be invisible. Marina's spine had stiffened while her hand stayed gentle at her belly. She lifted her chin. "I don't have anything that isn't mine." "I know," Alexander said without looking away from Greg. A ping sounded, files arriving. They stepped to the office. Screens flickered to life with grids of last night the amber, the white napkins, the awkward hush of people witnessing their own discomfort. "Bar camera," Alexander said. "Time stamp 9-1. The feed rolled. At a corner, a woman in diamonds, Mrs. Carroway, laughed too loudly, air-kissing no one because she didn't need anyone for that. At the coat rack camera, nothing. Marina's jacket had never been hung. "Dining room, wide," Alexander said. The bored girl's family table came into view. The girl had her phone up, recording the scene that would become make room. 2 tables over, at the bar rail, a woman in a black sheath dress watched in the mirror. She held a flute of champagne like a prop she'd forgotten to use. "Pause," Alexander said. "Zoom." The woman's face sharpened into view. Dark hair pulled sleekly back. Poised mouth. Calculating eyes. Alexander felt his chest tighten. Of all the people in New York, it had to be a familiar one. Ava Raines, PR chief for Sable & Rowe. The image firm his stepbrother favored when he wanted to look generous without being it. "Roll," he said. Voice even. Ava set her glass down. She drifted behind Marina and Alexander's table in a way that looked like nothing. She reached quick, near invisible, and slipped something pale and bright into the pocket of the jacket, puddled at the chair back. 2 seconds. Maybe 3. The playback continued. Ava returned to the bar. Mrs. Carroway discovered her missing bracelet 10 minutes later and performed distress like an aria. Silence filled the office. Greg swallowed. "I didn't see that last night." "You didn't look," Alexander replied. He turned to Marina then, and everything in his face softened. "You didn't do anything wrong." Her breath left her in a shaky exhale, the kind that makes your whole body lighter and heavier at once. Alexander faced Greg again. "You will call Mrs. Carroway, tell her her bracelet was found, and that it was not lost accidentally. You will apologize to my guest for suggesting otherwise." "Of course," Greg said quickly, sweat glistening at his temple. "We'll comp her for any—" "You'll apologize," Alexander repeated. "Then you'll gather the staff. In 1 hour I'm back, and we will review a new policy." Greg nodded, chastened. "Yes, sir." Alexander forwarded the clip to his counsel, then to his head of communications with 3 instructions. 1. Protect Marina's privacy. 2. If we say anything public, we center dignity, not drama. Ask Sable & Rowe why Ava Raines was in my dining room last night. They stepped out of the office. Marina's hands were steady now, but her cheeks had gone pale again. Adrenaline was a tide. Even when it left, it pulled at your knees. "Home?" Alexander asked softly. "Please." By noon, Make Room had 10 million views, and the smear had started to slither. A gossip account posted a grainy still of the bracelet bag and wrote, "From saint to thief." Another reposted Marina's shower-wet hair from last night and captioned it, "Pick me charity case." The format of cruelty was painfully familiar. Alexander stayed off the stage and got to work. He logged into the internal portal and sent a group-wide memo. Effective immediately. All guest policies will include a dignity clause. No one is refused service due to housing status, visible poverty, or pregnancy. Anyone using ambience to cloak cruelty can find another line of work. Then he added a line he hadn't planned to love. Kindness is policy. He looked up to find Marina watching him from the kitchen threshold, an orange in her hand. "You're changing it," she said, half wonder, half disbelief. "I should have changed it sooner," he said. "I'm sorry for that. You didn't owe me a revolution," she said softly. He thought about every closed door he'd walked past, because he had never had to ask what was behind it. "I did," he said. "I just didn't know it yet." Her mouth tilted in a small, tired smile. She rolled the orange on the counter as if it were a planet they could choose a different orbit for. "What happens to the woman who planted the bracelet?" "She answers questions," he said, and his phone buzzed on cue. A message from his general counsel with a screenshot Ava spotted entering Sable and Rowe at 7:58 a.m., and another from his stepbrother's assistant. He'd like to speak. Urgent. Of course he would. "Will this get worse?" Marina asked, one hand at her belly like instinct. "Probably before it gets better," he said, because lying would feel like another kind of theft. "But we'll meet it with truth, and we'll keep you out of the noise as much as possible. Do you want to speak publicly?" She shook her head, already pale at the thought. "I want to bake." The answer surprised a laugh out of him, not because it was funny, but because it was so purely her. "Bake? My mom taught me," she said, turning the orange in her hands. Before she got sick, she used to say, "There are two ways to answer ugliness. With fire or with sweetness. Fire's faster, sweetness lasts longer." "Then our answer is sweetness," he said, and found himself meaning more than pastry. He called his foundation director. "Remember the culinary incubator space?" he asked. "Open the downstairs kitchen today. I want a private session. No cameras, one student." "Who?" "Marina." At 2, while the internet decided what to be outraged about next, Marina stood at a stainless steel counter in a quiet kitchen that smelled like vanilla and heat. She tied an apron, rolled her sleeves, and set to work measuring, sifting, stirring. Alexander leaned against the far counter present, but giving her the invisible circle she needed to be herself. She didn't talk much. She moved with a focused tenderness that made the room feel like a kinder planet. When the first tray came out, small citrus loaves glazed with a whisper of lemon, she cut a slice and offered him half. He took a bite and closed his eyes. "It tasted like sunlight finding you after a long tunnel." "This," he said, opening his eyes again, "is not amateur." She shrugged, suddenly shy. "I got good at feeding people who are having a bad day." He held the rest of the slice between his fingers. "I have an idea," he said carefully. "A bakery, training new moms, on-site childcare, real wages. We call it Sunrise. I fund it. You run it. Only if you want. We build it slow." Her hands stilled on the counter. She looked up at him, defenses fluttering like birds, and then, slowly, settling. "You would give me that?" "I'd be honored to build it with you," he said. "But not as a favor, as faith." The timer ticked in the background. For a beat, neither of them moved. Then her eyes shone, and she nodded once, like a promise. "Okay," he smiled, helplessly. "Okay." His phone buzzed again. Ava's name this time, because audacity never tired. He silenced it. Marina slid another tray into the oven. "Do you want me to talk to the cameras outside when we leave?" he asked. "Say something that shields you?" She considered. "Say, kindness isn't content." He blinked. "That's good. It's true," she said. He tucked it away for later. They drove home at dusk. A small knot of press waited half a block from the gate, held back by security lines and neighborly complaints. Alexander stepped out first. Microphones reached like eager flowers. He kept his voice calm and brief. "Last night, a guest in my restaurant was treated with cruelty by patrons and indifference by staff. This morning, a planted bracelet was found in her coat. We reviewed footage. We know who planted it. We'll be pressing charges." "Who's the woman?" someone shouted. "An employee of a firm my family has used," he said. "They'll answer for it. Not tonight." is the woman you helped your girlfriend. He glanced back toward the tinted window, to where Marina waited, hands folded in her lap, gaze on her belly. A simpler man would have said yes to end speculation. A colder man would have said no to stay untangled. She's a person, he said evenly, and she's not a headline. Statement? Another called. He nodded once. Kindness isn't content, he said, and watched pens and thumbs move. He went inside, the door shut, the world quieted. In the entryway, Marina stood with her back to the wall, watching him with an expression that was part gratitude, part worry, part something he was not brave enough to name yet. You didn't have to go out there, she said. I know, he said. I wanted to. They stood in the hush for a moment. The house didn't feel lonely. It felt like a pause between breaths. Tomorrow, he said. No cameras, just flower. Tomorrow, she echoed, and a tiny foot pressed against her palm like agreement. They passed the nursery on the way down the hall. The moon nightlight cast its gentle arc. The yellow blanket waited like folded sunlight, as if it had always belonged in a house that once forgot to expect company. Down the block, a phone vibrated in a pocket that didn't deserve the weight of it. Ava read the news alert. Bracelet planted, owner speaks, and smiled without mirth. She had wanted a scandal she could spin. Now she had a war she could lose. Plan B, she told the mirror. Inside the quiet house, Alexander turned off lights one by one. In the soft dark, Marina paused, hand on the doorframe of the room that would soon have a name painted in little letters above the crib. Alexander? She said gently. Yes? Thank you for making space. Host time. He looked at her for a long heartbeat, all his answers too big for the hallway. Thank you, he said finally, for filling it. He watched her disappear into light, felt the shape of a life shifting, and knew this. The world could argue itself hoarse outside. In here, the work would be flower and laughter and nights that smelled like vanilla and the small, fierce rhythm of new breath. And tomorrow, they would begin. By morning, the house remembered how to be lived in. It started with small things. The sound of a kettle before sunrise, the soft thud of a mixer, the hush of a lullaby. Marina didn't even realize she was humming while she measured flour. Alexander woke to scents he'd never associated with home vanilla. Citrus, the shy sweetness of something baking, and a quiet that felt full rather than empty. Borrow your oven? She asked from the kitchen doorway. Hair braided, sleeves rolled. My oven has been waiting for this, he said, and meant it. The foundation kitchen had given her muscle memory back. Here, she moved with the same steady focus, sifting, whisking, tasting, with the tip of a spoon like she was checking on the weather inside the batter. Hope rolled in approval. Alexander learned to read the small signs. The way Marina's hand paused at her lower back meant she needed a chair. The way she stilled meant a wave of nausea was passing. The soft smile meant the lemon had landed exactly where she wanted it. They ate warm slices at the island. You cooked mercy, he said after the first bite. Lemon loaf, she corrected, cheeks pinking. But I'll take mercy. Light. They built rhythms. Doctor's calls in the morning. A short walk by the river at noon. Rest in the afternoon. He placed a basket near the nursery. Pacifiers. Burp cloths. Tiny socks that seemed to multiply. And a second basket near the sofa for letters they would answer together. Messages from strangers who had seen the video and wrote not to gawk but to say, I was hungry once. Someone saw me, too. Marina read until her eyes burned, hand at her chest. There are so many of us, she whispered. More than screens show. Then sunrise needs to be bigger than a bakery, Alexander said. Training, childcare, counseling, a path. A table, she added, with enough chairs. They sketched on the back of envelopes and then on proper paper. Intake with dignity, paid training, a licensed on-site caregiver, trauma-informed supervisors, a rotation so women could be with their babies and still earn. He insisted on one non-negotiable. Founder's credit. Your name first. It doesn't have to be. It does, he said. Because girls will come through those doors and believe more is possible when they see you at the helm. When fatigue hit, Marina didn't apologize. She learned to say, I need 10 minutes. and he learned to answer. Take 20. In the quieter evenings, they assembled shelves and folded onesies the size of his palm. He read aloud from a worn board book he'd ordered in a midnight burst of whim. Marina laughed when hope kicked hard at his voice. She likes you, she said. I'm very persuasive, he deadpanned, then softer. I like her more. The bracelet clip did what truth does, moved slower than rumor but farther. Comments shifted. Donations arrived with notes like, my mother, and when I was 19. Alexander's lawyer confirmed charges were being filed. His stepbrother texted, we should get ahead of this. Optics. Alexander typed, deleted, and finally sent. We're getting ahead of people. That afternoon, a cream envelope slid under the front gate, addressed in elegant script. Inside, an invitation printed on heavy stock. Sable and Rowe Annual Benefactors Gala to honor leaders in civic compassion. Requested, Alexander Sanders plus guest. Below, a handwritten postscript from the firm's CEO. We'd love to highlight your kindness. Our showrunner is planning a segment. Come, accept, he showed Marina. There will be cameras, he warned. So many, she said, the corners of her mouth wry. And a showrunner, planning kindness like a dance number. We can decline, he said. Or, she answered, eyes searching his face, we can go on our terms. Tell them what we're actually building. He tipped his head. Only this once, if you're sure. I'm not sure of anything, she said honestly, except that hiding never protected me. You'll be beside me? Every step, he said. They RSVP'd, yes? And wrote their own segment. Marina would speak briefly about work that lasts longer than a headline. Then they'd invite donors to sunrise. That night, the moon nightlight threw its soft arc. Marina paused in the nursery doorway, palms spread over the yellow blanket. What are you thinking? He asked. That I want her first story to be about warmth, she said. Not how loud the world can be. I'm green. Then we'll keep the loud outside, he promised. And build the warmth in here. She looked at him, longer than before. Something steady was growing between them. No rush, no leverage, no debt. Just room. Good night, Alexander, she said softly. Good night, Marina. Down the hall, the house listened to their names, spoken like a beginning. They arrived through a side entrance to avoid the red carpet, but there was never truly a side entrance to spectacle. Light exploded off glass. Chandeliers chimed like laughter. Photographers turned as if scenting a better story. Breathe, Alexander murmured. Counting helps, Marina replied. In for 4, hold, out for 6. They counted together. Inside, a string quartet offered elegance as a bribe. Sable and Rowe's CEO greeted them with teeth. Alexander, she sang. And Marina. She tasted the name like it was trending. We are thrilled. We're here to talk about sunrise, Alexander said. Of course, she lied. Our run of show features your moment of compassion. Kindness isn't content, he said evenly. It's policy. Her smile faltered. That's catchy. It's true, Marina put in. They took seats near the aisle. Alexander kept his hand on the armrest between them, not touching hers but anchoring the space. He watched her center herself, shoulders down, jaw unclenched, gaze steady. He wanted to be a roof and a floor and a windbreak. He settled for being beside her. Halfway through the program, the lights dipped for a tribute. A giant screen bloomed to life. For a beat, the steakhouse video played. Jacket, chair, second plate. Applause rose. Then the cut changed, unflattering stills pulled from nowhere. A pixelated docket labeled eviction. A side-by-side of an old application and a recent one with inconsistencies highlighted in red. Alexander went cold. He rose before his brain caught up, but Marina's fingers touched his sleeve once. Light, she stood instead. Excuse me, she said to the row, voice level, and walked toward the stage. The room held its breath because rooms like this love a fall. Instead, Marina took the microphone. My name is Marina, she said. I was evicted while caring for a sick mother. I've told the truth in every room that gave me time to finish a sentence. If you want spectacle, keep playing the edit. If you want to help, Meet me at the back of this ballroom in 10 minutes where I'll show you what we actually do. Murmurs like wind in wheat. The CEO sputtered something about program order, but curiosity was already on its feet. Alexander met Marina in the wing. Do you want to leave? He asked. I want to bake, she said, fierce and trembling. So they pivoted. In a storage corridor, staff scrambled to help. The foundation director arrived with a rolling cart and wide eyes. I got your text. We brought the starter. In a side room near the kitchen, Marina tied on a borrowed apron over her dress and led a volunteer brigade like a general with sugar. They assembled citrus tarts and tiny brioche with butter that tasted like noon. Alexander ferried trays, stacked plates, and kept a subtle half-step at her side. 10 minutes later, a line formed beneath a hand-lettered sign. Sunrise. Marina didn't give a speech. She served. She looked donors in the eyes and said, paid training, childcare on site, trauma-informed managers, no unpaid stages. She handed out bite-sized sweetness, and with it, a plan. Alexander watched people melt in the way only honesty can do, slow and permanent. His stepbrother circled, frowning, and Ava hovered at the far end. Phone up, scanning for an angle. He texted legal. Preserve all comms from S&R. Pull Ava's emails. Subpoena. Prep. Later, under softer lights, he found Marina in a quiet alcove, hands braced on a stainless counter, breath shivery from adrenaline. You were extraordinary, he said. I was terrified, she admitted. I thought I'd faint during the second tart. You didn't, he said. You stayed. She looked at him then, all defenses lowered by exhaustion and relief. I'm falling, she whispered, as if testing whether the words could stand up in the world. Slowly, carefully. Not because you saved me, because you see me. His answer was a breath he hadn't known he'd been holding for years. I am, too. He swallowed, and I'm scared I'll ruin it. Then we go slow, she said. We build, we don't perform. Deal, he said. He didn't kiss her. He reached for her hand and held it lightly, like an agreement. Somewhere outside, the program struggled to recover its narrative. Inside this small, bright room, they had chosen theirs. Donations poured in before midnight, small and large, recurring, anonymous, loud. The CEO attempted a pivot on stage, a spontaneous activation, she called it, which fooled no one. The clip of Marina declining to be a prop outran the smear. Sunrise trended before the gala ended. Back home, the moon nightlight glowed. They stood in the doorway again, hands not quite touching. Good night, she murmured. Good night, he echoed. Joy and fear braided tight. Sleep came easier. Truth had that effect. The will was a blunt instrument dressed up as a letter. Alexander received it in his counsel's office 3 mornings after the gala, a sealed duplicate of the terms he already knew, but had avoided reading in his father's own words. Is greater than. To preserve the family's reputation and continuity of leadership, control of Sanders Holdings passes in full to the eldest son upon marriage before his 35th birthday. Failing that, control passes to the next of kin. His birthday, 6 months away. The next of kin, his stepbrother Keen, charming, unmoored. Counsel cleared his throat. We can challenge the spirit, not the letter. Or we can comply. Or we can change the game, Alexander said. The stepbrother called before he got home. This is simple, he chirped. Engagement. Something glossy. Sable, and Roe has a deck. No, Alexander said. Don't be precious. You want to keep control. I want to build a company that deserves control, he said, and hung up. He told Marina on the balcony at dusk, the city washing gold. There's a clause, he began. If I don't marry by 35, I lose control. Her face didn't do the things he feared fear. Calculation, resignation. It did something else, softened with regret that wasn't about her. I'm sorry, he wrote. Love like a requirement. I need. I won't use you, he said at once. I won't ask for something you aren't ready to give, because it solves a problem I didn't create. Her hand found the rail. What if I want the thing too? Not the clause, the life. He looked at her. the honesty of it almost undoing him. Then we say yes on our time, and we risk the crown. He met with his board that night. We're moving voting power into a public benefit trust, he announced. A weighted veto aligned with Sunrise principles. We'll accept dilution. We'll stabilize governance with values, not optics. You'll lose control, someone warned. I'll share it, he corrected, and we'll keep our soul. His stepbrother threatened a proxy fight. Donors threatened to tighten purse strings. Then the unexpected happened. Clients who had watched the gala pivot called to say, "We're with you." Employees who had once kept their heads down raised their hands. Kindness as policy wasn't just press. Kitchens ran calmer. Staff stayed. Guests returned. Ava tried one more maneuver. She leaked a story blending the will, Marina, and a line about strategic engagement. It trended for 3 hours before a very different link took its place. Internal Sable and Rowe emails. Obtained legally. Showing the bracelet plant, discussed like a brainstorm and signed off with her initials. The firm dropped her within the day. The DA moved quickly. The stepbrother went suddenly, strategically quiet. In the eye of it, Marina and Alexander chose ordinary moments as an act of rebellion. A Tuesday at the incubator kitchen. A Friday morning doctor's appointment. A Saturday trying on baby carriers and arguing good-naturedly about buckles. He learned to assemble a bassinet without swearing. She learned to trust that he would be at every appointment he said he'd attend. One evening, while hope hiccuped inside her like tiny bubble wrap, Marina said, "You don't have to be brave for me all the time." "I'm not brave," he admitted. "I'm just very certain." "Of what?" "You," he said. She took his hand then and placed it where the hiccups were. "Then let's be certain together." The trust restructure went through. Control diluted, values centralized. His father's claws made toothless by a governance that would outlast birthdays. His stepbrother called once more, slight, clipped, beaten, and didn't call again. That night, he and Marina stood by the river, wind cool on their faces, city lights doing their endless persuasion. "We don't have to rush," he said. "But I want you to know I want a life with you. A slow one." "Slow is my favorite speed," she said. He laughed, quiet and bright. "Mine, too." They didn't set a date. They set a direction. Sunrise opened on a Saturday that smelled like cinnamon and courage. The line formed before the doors did women with strollers, aunties with opinions, neighbors curious and kind. A chalkboard read "Welcome Home" in Marina's looping hand. Inside. Bright aprons, a corner padded with mats and board books. A supervisor with a gentle voice. A schedule that respected nap windows and bus timetables. "First rule," Marina told the new cohort, voice steady over the clatter. "You're paid. Second rule, if your baby cries, you're never in the way. Third, we learn slow. Slow lasts." Alexander watched from the back hands in pockets, heart too large for his chest. He stayed mostly out of the camera frames, mostly off the plaques. When the press asked for a quote, he pointed to the chalkboard and said, "That's our statement." A familiar face showed up at 10. The bored steakhouse girl from the video, now less bored and more brave, holding a shoebox of note cards. "My mom said I could bring these," she blurted. "They're comments I printed from the video. The good ones. Sometimes it helps to see them on paper." Marina hugged her, gratitude cracking her voice. "It does." At noon, a woman in a blue dress stepped in hesitantly, eyes wet. "I was in that restaurant," she confessed to Marina. "I didn't speak up. I'm sorry. I'm here to volunteer, if you'll have me." "We always need hands for childcare," Marina said. Not unkind, not triumphant, just open. "And we always have room for better next times." By afternoon, the bell above the door had found its rhythm. Flour dusted everything worth keeping. A donor cried over a tart. A trainee laughed for the first time in months. Hope slept in a sling against Marina's chest, lulled by her mother's voice running inventory. In the quiet between waves, Alexander slid a small wooden box onto the counter. "For you," he said. Inside, a simple ring, bright as morning, and beneath it, a wooden spoon engraved with 2 words, "Build slow." He didn't launch into a speech. He didn't climb a chair. He just stood there, hope and certainty making him look younger. "Before I ask," he said, "you don't owe me a yes for any reason but your heart. I would have done all of this sunrise, nursery shelves, lemon loaves, without this moment. But I want to spend my life choosing you. Choosing you when the internet is loud and when the house is quiet. Will you marry me?" Marina looked down at Hope, whose fist had found the edge of her sling like a flag, then up at the man who had turned Rome into a promise and a promise into a place other women could stand. "Yes," she said, not loud, not trembling clear. He slipped the ring on. She slipped the spoon into the pocket of her apron like a charm. The room applauded without being asked. Someone popped a bottle. Someone else wiped their eyes with the back of a flowery hand. They married by the river before sunset. A few weeks later, small, simple. A circle of folding chairs. A pastor who kept it short. A playlist made by friends. A cake baked by people who had learned to measure their own worth in grams and grace. The vows were not poetry. They were plain and brave. "I will not perform love," Alexander promised. "I will practice it. I won't outrun safety anymore," Marina promised. "I'll let it stay." Hope gurgled at the exact wrong moment, and everyone laughed. It felt like blessing. Ava pled to a lesser charge, barred from her industry for a time that would feel like forever. The stepbrother found a startup in a city that didn't know him yet. The restaurants posted a notice near the host stands. Kindness is policy, and meant it. The board girl volunteered every Saturday. Mrs. Carraway mailed a check and an apology that sounded almost like growth. Epilogue small. On a Tuesday, the bell over Sunrise's door rang, and a young woman stepped in, damp from the weather, hand at her belly, eyes cautious. Marina recognized the posture, the way fear makes a person try to take up less space. "Hi," Marina said, meeting her halfway with a towel and tea. "You're here. That's enough for today." Alexander stood from a back table, gave the woman room, and caught Marina's eye across the bustle. The look they shared said everything vows could not hold. "We will make room. We will build slow. We will keep the door open." On the wall behind the counter, beneath a framed print of a yellow blanket and a little moon, hung a small card in careful handwriting. "Kindness is policy. Home is the practice. The end." Did you enjoy this story? Kindly let us know where you are watching from. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel.